Welcome back to another episode of the Zealous Podcast. I'm Rocky Snyder, and this week I have the extreme pleasure of inviting Dan John on the show. Dan spent his life lifting and throwing, All-American discus thrower. He's competed at the highest levels of Olympic lifting, Highland Games, and the weight pentathlon. He's a college professor and a whole lot more. He's written Never Let Go, Mass Made Simple, Easy Strength, as well as Fat Loss Happens on Monday. He co-authored that too. And so he's obviously an author, a presenter with Perform Better, and one heck of a coach. I hope you enjoy the show. This is kind of something I want to talk to because you've got a great balance of, in regards to background, between obviously weightlifting, which is typically what I'm sure people ask you about, but I'm intrigued by spirituality. I'm intrigued by contemplative studies and how they are overlaid into physical movement.
Well, actually, when you go back to the roots, you'd have to go back, to the German model and then how it got interpreted here in the United States. But yeah.
Is that the Jan method or the Ling method?
Well, that whole, remember those schools or the physical culture schools?
Yeah.
They always had a spiritual element. I mean, if you go to something as simple as breakfast cereal, Salisbury steak, Kellogg's with
Kellogg's in Post,
right? In Post, they all had a large spiritual element to them. Spiritual, not necessarily religious, and they were as cultish as we are today in our weightlifting and training ideas. Where if you do this, then this will happen. Was it Kellogg believed that excessive meat led to masturbation or something like that, which was fascinating.
There is that. There was also this movement in the 1800s, roughly the same time, maybe a little earlier, called muscular Christianity. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's made a big comeback in the past 10 years or so.
Really?
Oh, I mean, I have several friends that their books are, every chapter starts off with a scripture line, and whole chapters of the book dedicated to this or that. Yeah. Well, the problem is it also turns off a lot of your audience, so you have to be very kind of careful about how you do that.
Well, therein lies the delineation between organized religion and spirituality. I mean, they're not synonymous. Right? You've got spiritual principles which can be potentially universal in a lot of belief systems. Would you say that?
Yeah. What you would generally say is that, religion is a tradition. Religion comes from the same root as ligament. It means to link back. So religions tend to have a founder, a basic scriptural thing, but the roots are, of course, it's the spiritual side of things. Sometimes, in fact, it's a good friend of mine says this all the time. When someone says, I'm spiritual, he always follows up as, what do you mean by that? Because what that means is going to really change. It could even be, we could even have 7 billion answers to that question today, because so many, it's not like it was before. But yeah, let's get going here, and let's talk about 5 sets of 2 and all the rest. Yeah.
Well, that seems so pedestrian, to be honest. I mean, because we're not going to come up with anything new, right? Everything has pretty much been established. There's nothing new. We're going to try and tweak something here and there with program design or some type of new instrumentation or technology to create a new flavor of the month. And then people are going to taste that and be running with it for some time. And then they're going to get completely kind of used to it, and then they're going to need a new flavor, and I see that being a problem with fitness in general, right? We're always trying to reinvent the wheel when it all comes back down to the basics. Can we get enough sleep? Can we eat properly? And can we move our bodies with purpose in a way that will bring about more longevity, right?
Well, in the March-April Trek Technique 1974, Dave Davis writes that Olympic lifting and powerlifting is all throwers ever need to do. I would maybe throw in farmer walks or hill sprints too, but that's just because that's the way I am. But that's 1974, and there's been there's nothing to add to that. And when you do try to go down the sports specificity run, you very often you do all these things, but you don't throw as far as a guy who powerlifts and Olympic lifts. It might look cooler. So yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. When you read Tommy Kono's work say what he was doing, I have the magazine up there in 1952 to prepare himself for the Olympics in Helsinki. You read that program and go, well, this is a solid program. There's nothing. That's pretty damn good. And he had to clean and press also, not just snatch and clean and jerk. And if you read, if you go back and you read Bill Pearl, I don't know, same time, 5 sets of 5, doing that, we now would call more power bodybuilding. Gentle listener, if you pick 9 exercises and do 5 sets of 5 3 days a week, well, you're a better man than I, because I don't know how the hell you could do military, bench press, row, pull up, squat, deadlift, 5 sets of 5 in the same workout 3 times a week. That just gets me going, wow. And then throw some curls, triceps, and some ab stuff. Whoo, that's 5 sets of 5 and a squat and deadlift in the same workout. That's a prescription there.
Yeah. Okay, so most sports are unilateral and a lot dealing with rotary power. So a lot of the lifts that we're doing are bilateral in nature to develop some base strength, but
right.
There's more movement these days. A few of the fellow presenters that perform better are really talking about unilateral training. Where do you see that in terms of percentage if you were designing programs? Are they accessories, or are they going to be fundamental foundations?
I'm more almost, so I break the movements in the weight room down to push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry. The snatch would be a combination of those. The clean would be a combination of those. Okay. And for me, I just think most people haven't really, people get on me because of my hatred of lunges, but it's like, if you're doing farmer walks and prowlers, or, you're getting that movement in. Certainly, I think, it's funny. I come off as very negative to it, but I have it in all the programs we do. But I use one arm press, one arm bench press, single arm row. Bear hug carries and a whole bunch of other things. I used the word a moment or two ago, but prescriptive. There's a need for this now. This is. I often say, when you work, especially with teenage boys, say he benches 200 pounds and then you test him on the one arm bench press. My standard is the 32 kilo bell for a teenager, one arm bench press, 5 right and 5 left. But what you find sometimes with a teenage boy is 32 kilos, about 70 pounds. So he's bench pressing 10 reps with the 70 pound kettlebell. And then when he switches to the left hand, he can only do it once or twice, which means that basically they're kind of benching like this, it's exaggeration. If someone's listening, basically they're doing a one arm bench press with the other hand acting like a rudder, maybe,
Yeah, whether the bar is shifted or if it's lowered on the
lowered up. Limb, yeah.
Right?
Oh, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
And so for me, and also too, there's a lot of value. I think there's a lot of value in the suspension trainer one arm row. I like the heels together because it shows that when you do the rows with your heels together, with your knees together, laying back, if you get a whole ton of movement, you're not really stable when you're trying to get that. That's when you do one arm bench press as the offhand. I like to be free to show the importance of that. The bench press becomes a lower body exercise if the one arm is free. So I use those. It could be as often as every 3rd week that we would focus on that for some, kind of depending on what we're working on. Other times it could be like, oh, maybe something that would be the November, December workouts for a spring, summer athlete. We would do a lot more of the unilateral stuff then. But once you get close to the season, once you start doing your sport, I like things to be as simple as you possibly can.
Is it
So
because at that time they're really working on
yeah,
their
there's all
skills?
the real important qualities. Yeah, and I see athletics I see my job as like the symbol of yin yang. So what we want to do is when I'm working with a 12-year-old discus thrower, his technique would be stretch, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and that's fine. And he probably have, say, what I say, 13. So he has an 85-pound bench press, 85-pound front squat. Well, the problem is for most young athletes, it's real easy to get stronger. So this boy leaps up to a 300-pound bench press, 300-pound front squat, blah, blah, blah. And yet his technique is still stretch, 1, 2. So I like the idea of yin yang, and my job is to expand the entire circle. So one of the things I try really hard to do is try to make sure that their strength, the loads that they're training with, correspond with where they are in their kind of technical, their sports field. You can win a lot of high school football games with a very, very elementary, simple lifting program, like the ones we use when I played. As you move up, you're going to have more and more and more qualities in a Division I football player. And if you jump up from there, recovery is going to be far more important than the training of an NFL player. So yeah, I always like to make sure I'm matching the strength. Where they are in the strength world is where they are in their technical sports specific world. I call it flat tires. A lot of great throwers before, say, 1962, they were throwing 190s, drug free, without weightlifting. Throwing 190 the discus is impressive, but they were flat tires. When weightlifting first started to become very popular for track and field, probably after Otis Chandler, the 40s, the 50s, all of a sudden these guys discovered that, boy, if I just build up my strength, I throw farther and farther and farther. But here's where the problem came, Rocky, is that the next generation said, well, I just going to be in the weight room, get as strong as they physically can. But they didn't have those 200 shot put throwing workouts that these guys had done. They didn't have those 6-hour marathon discus throwing sessions 4 days a week that's this. So the job, I think, in 2021 or 2 or whatever it is, as you're listening, is that we have to make sure we look and to make sure that our strength qualities sort of match our technical qualities. And a flat tire on either side has to be addressed as quickly as you can.
Okay, and this is something I commonly ask to a lot of people that I have conversations with. 1940, great. I mean, most individuals were coming from farm strength. Mm-hmm. Today, we've got a lack of farm strength and an increase in technology. So a decrease potentially that's ongoing with structural integrity and skills, for that matter, because of a reduction in physical education in school systems and single sport athletes not being multi-sport athlete. So how do you contend with that? Are you seeing this, and what are you doing?
Actually, if you don't mind, it reminds me when I first went to Utah State, and Coach Mon, he's considered the greatest Aggie. He told me about Glenn Passy. Now, Glenn Passy weighed 178 and I weighed 231. And we both threw the discus over 190. The difference was Glenn Passy grew up on a farm in Idaho, and he was noted for his ability. He was the best hay bale thrower that they had in the area, and he was very proud of it. He would spend the summer picking up 40-pound bales of hay and then throwing them up into the rafters. Well, okay, that's part one. Part two, he did farmer walks all the time, because that's how you got this to there. Number three, and this is what I think is important, he was told that he needed to lift to throw farther. And someone said to him, you should be able to clean and press and snatch. So press, snatch, body weight, and clean and jerk maybe 20 pounds more. So what he did is he went in the weight room every day, tested himself. If he couldn't do those 3 things, he worked out until he could do those 3 things, and then stopped lifting weights. And then every so often just checked in on it to make sure if he could snatch body weight, press body weight, he was good enough and he stopped lifting. If he didn't, he'd come back in a few times until he could. And I tell people this and they look at me like, are you saying I should stop lifting weights? Oh, did you miss the entire point of it? The point is that if you spend 3 to 4 months every year throwing 40-pound hay bales up into rafters and carrying heavy stuff all the time. And then in the fall, choose to clean and press, snatch, and clean and jerk about 20 body weight, and then maybe 20 pounds over body weight. This magical thing's going to happen where you throw farther. But what people miss is the whole formula. And I think so his GPP, if you want to I hate that phrase. I just hate that Soviet stuff. I do. I hate the Soviet stuff. Mostly because my friends from the Soviet Union told me most of it's nonsense.
Oh, it's just fabricated?
Yeah, my friend, he just passed away about 3 weeks ago. Yuri Sadiq, the world record holder in the hammer, still the world record holder. One time we're at lunch and he basically told me to stop asking these kinds of questions because no, that's not how we did things. And then my other friend, Vasily, this great weightlifter here that lives in Utah now, is back in Colorado. He told me one time, goes, the part of Russia he's from, when they speak English, they have a little bit of a lisp by the way they put their words together. So it's always kind of fun, but I won't imitate him. He goes, Dan, most of the good lifters were illiterate. They couldn't have read these programs. And so were their coaches. And I went, oh, he goes, this is not how we trained. And then he showed me how they trained. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I can see why you guys are good. Yeah. So I think my long-winded explanation was you're absolutely right. And there's ways we can in this generation build that back up. And that's why I push the loaded carry so much. The farmer walks, the hill runs, rucking, prowlers, sled drags, carrying weights overhead, all that stuff.
Because so you're really describing a freedom of movement under load, not necessarily a very strict robotic kind of path that you would find on, say, bench press, deadlift, squat. I mean, there is a whole bunch of different environments, right?
So Rocky, in 2002, somebody asked me what was my mission and what was my mission statement. I said, pick weights up off the ground, put them overhead and carry them for time or distance. That's almost 20 years ago. And I had been believing that for 12, 13, 14 years before that. So yeah, pick up heavy weights, put them over your head, carry them. It's honestly, if you had a football program where they just picked up heavy weights, picked up other weights, put them over their head and then carried the rest, you'd be pretty good. That'd make a great thrower. The Olympic lifts and the power lifts, let's be honest, you pick them up off the ground, you put them over. I pick the weights up, I put them overhead. I mean, it's just, yeah. So yeah,
strong as bull, yes.
Yeah, and you get weird strong. What we were noticing when we first introduced the farmer and suitcase carries was that people were starting to notice that their implements, the Highland game implements, the discus, the javelin, the hammer, were like going farther, but they couldn't see, like they couldn't, I'm pretending it's a training program. You're trying, how you do this BS with the training program where you go, well, see, I should be throwing a personal record today. Now, why is that? Well, because you see these numbers? Oh, these numbers on a piece of paper are going to dictate the flight of that discus. Well, get back to me on that. Okay, call me in 20 years up to you. And the truth is sometimes, and this is a foundational belief. If something you do makes the shot put go farther, I don't care what it is. You're right. When Dick Fosbury went to the high jump bar the wrong way, and his coach tried to stop him, by the way, his coach who tried to stop him from doing the jump, after he got the gold medal, his coach went around the nation teaching everybody how to do this technique. Yeah, that's hypocrisy. Is there two Y's in hypocrisy? Dick Fosbury was right. It is a far more efficient technique to run up and do his flop. And that's the beauty of track and field. If it works, it's right. And I would say the same about swimming also. Swimming and track and field, because you have the clock and the timer and the tape measure. In other sports, sometimes you sort of kind of know something's right, but you can't prove it. In American football, it's pretty obvious to me that if I have, faster, bigger athletes, from stem to stern on my team, we're going to do okay. unless we do something really stupid. And that's the problem, is that, some really, really good coaches do some really, really stupid things and lose games. But in track and field, if that shot put goes 75 feet, 76 feet, 77 feet, whatever you're doing is right.
So you've coached a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
and obviously track and field. What makes the most ideal student? Not what makes the best coach, because you hear that question all the time. Oh, what makes a great coach?
Do you want the sad truth?
Yeah.
There has to be something missing in their life. They have to have an emotional trauma.
Tell me more.
Yeah, isn't that, I don't like saying this.
Well, I mean, it'd be nice to talk about, though.
Yeah, I mean, it bothers me to say it out loud. And I hope the listeners aren't going, this guy is actively, looking for, but
No.
if there's a hole in someone's heart, and there's an issue at home, there's a missing, or there's a parental issue, there's a personal issue. I mean, I'd like to sit down with little Danny John right now and say, all those brothers coming home from Vietnam and all the crap you have to put up with, and your dad's issues and stuff, it's going to make you a really good athlete. I'd like to be able to say that sentence, but the best athletes I've usually have worked with, and it's almost 100%, there is a hole that needs to be filled, and they fill it through sport. And the nice thing is that if it's done correctly, we can pay for the college education, world travel, all kinds of wonderful things can happen. It's hard to say this. It's Rocky. It doesn't make me happy. It makes me but it's like,
no. When did you start noticing that? When did that kind of hit you, going, holy cow, this is what it's about?
Probably so I've been coaching a few years, but I was at a school where, I called it a rich kid school the other day because, it's a rich kid school. But what I noticed is a lot of the kids who had, it would be like, on paper, you should be really good. And I'd say things like, it doesn't matter. Did you do this? Oh, no, coach. And then they'd have some wonderful story about, mother and I went to Tibet this weekend, and, I milked yaks, and I turned the yak milk into, ghee, and we had it in a delicious tea with ghee. Oh, okay. So, because when I was in high school, what'd you do this weekend? Try to stay the hell out of the house, because mom would make me clean up and do chores. So I went out and threw the discus for 6 hours, because it was always okay to go throw the discus. So if you're too normal, it's hard to be a good athlete. I've noticed this in my career. This is why I find it harder and harder to coach younger people. Is that one of the reasons I think in my neighborhood so many athletes came up, is that all of our dad were World War II veterans. All the moms were at home. So if you went home, mom told you either do your homework or do chores. And most of us wanted a better standard of living. So there was this hunger, for things. And we had this, we would get together on the weekends and, cobble together all the weights and lift weights at 7 o'clock at night there in foggy South San Francisco, foggy and cold South San Francisco. South San Francisco is the coldest spot on earth. I'll tell you this straight up right now.
It is.
It is cold. It's damn cold. So we'd be on the back deck, whatever that thing was, the porch was what it was called, and doing our incline bench press and our squats. And because we didn't have, listen to me, I was about to say Nintendo. We didn't have that. Nintendo, you kids, we didn't have the Facebook. We didn't have that there Instagramsies. We didn't really have a lot, and truth is, by God, if you use the phone, in my house, the phones were for emergencies or my mom talking to her friends. That was it, so you couldn't just call up and say, hey, our Instagram, we're going to have a party. It was just different, but it made good athletes.
All right.
And we sometimes will joke as coaches about how all of us wish we were, I had a friend one time get very specific, a war orphanage without alumni. So it has to be that'd be the best place to coach. You have to deal with no parents, and you have to deal with no alumni. Life would be so much better, which I thought was pretty funny. Um, yeah, I'm just saying, you're right. So your point about we call it dad strength, farmer strength, that's missing. I think I think with the COVID pandemic, you got a chance to see how, even given all that free time, most people, most of the young athletes I worked with didn't use all that free time to throw the javelin more, or throw the discus more, or lift weights more. They did nothing. They did nothing. Many of the people I interact with, they'll say, I believe it's called the COVID 15 or the COVID 25 or something. They
Sure.
put on a lot of weight. And so if you're given tons and tons of free time, that doesn't necessarily equate to training harder and harder and harder. But if you get punched in the face, I mean, I hate the Charles Atlas commercial about the guy getting sand kicked in his face.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of truth to, there's a lot of truth to it. I was gonna say a little bit, but there's a lot of truth to it.
You mentioned just a few minutes back what you would tell young Danny John. I'm curious, like, what other things, just looking back over your coaching career, would you tell the new coach, Dan John, the younger version?
Oh,
Well,
of coach.
for you,
Oh, as a
for
coach,
as a
yeah.
yeah, just a little different. Like
First
all the
up,
things you've learned.
yeah, I would, I have this thing where I try to stick everything into threes. I try to summarize everything in threes. And I was doing that at the time, and I would have sat him down and said, take that even more seriously. So it's a thing I call the prisoner's dilemma. And Rocky, so it's very simple. It's just this. You have this goal, but for whatever reason, you're only allowed 3 15-minute opportunities a week to train, whatever the goal is, to do whatever the goal is. So what would you do? Whatever the goal is. And I've asked some very, very famous people this question. And it's interesting because the most successful basketball coach I ever talked to, he answered it like this. Boom, boom, boom. Fighter pilot, the only guy ever to fly in combat a warthog and an eagle. 2 different wars, but he's the only person to ever fly. That's a massive change. And I said, well, what are the 3 keys? Boom, boom, boom. John Heisman, 1931, said, block, tackle, control the ball. Ball control. Still true 2021. There's never change. So I would have sat him down and had him do the prisoner's dilemma with everything he was doing. What are the 3 things? When I first coached American football, I was a defensive back coach. What are the 3 things a defensive back needs to know? Here's a real quick one. Your eyes are faster than your feet. Your eyes are fastest. So when you're a defensive back, when they break the huddle, you should be staring about the way they come out of the huddle. You should be checking this stuff all the time. When the ball is snapped, I mean, you can shuffle into a direction, but honestly, your eyes are going to be a lot faster than your feet ever have been. So you just break it down like that. That would be the first thing I would do with him, is do the prisoner's dilemma. The next thing I would do is tell him that you are right about the weight room. Olympic lift, power lift. That's, people, I was a big believer in the clean, the snatch, putting stuff, pick weights up off the ground, put them overhead. But the thing that he was missing, I would have said, do you remember doing all those hills in college? Yeah, you need to do hills. You got to keep doing hill sprints. And I would have farmer walks and hill sprints would be the two gaps. So the 3 things would be this. He didn't trust himself. He kept looking for the Holy Grail. He kept searching. More trust. Number 2, that hill sprint, farmer walk, that loaded carry gap was huge. And then the third thing is constantly coming back to the prisoner's dilemma of what would you do in that 15-minute period? And then from there, if you're given half an hour at the defensive backs, there's 3 overriding principles that make good defensive backs. And then every drill you did, I call it cueing now. In the weight room, basically, here are the cues I use. Stay tall, squeeze, and go, go, go. Now, originally it was just go, go, but I didn't like it, so I added a third go. Very exciting. I think it changed sports as we know it. Because, so the cues I use in the weight room are cues you'd probably hear this 50 times in a workout. Stay tall, stay tall, stay tall, stay tall, squeeze, squeeze, and then go, go, go. Because those cues are that's all, when I throw the discus, it takes me, once my right foot moves, it takes me 1.6 seconds to deliver the discus. I mean, how much can you think in 1.6 seconds? Nothing. You can ruin everything, but you can't really think. So I would have a long conversation with him about, here are the cues, here's the prisoner's dilemma, and now make the cues in the prisoner's dilemma come together, and then make the drills in the cues and the prisoner's dilemma come together, and then branch out when it's 11 on 11 or whatever the sport calls for, then branch out. And so that what is said, what I consider the most important three things, carry through. Now, obviously, things expanded. There's more skills you need to know, plenty of skills you need to know, but they still have that same, that same in the middle. The middle stays the same.
Sure.
The middle stays the same.
And the triad or the tripod or the Holy Trinity, or however you want to voice it, that is the fundamental firmament from which that middle is hoisted up on.
Right. And then you build on that, but you don't just, so when you add, in fact, it can happen. I get a call from San Francisco 49ers, and they say, Dan, this is what we're doing this week. Here's this little trick we've found, and it works great. I take that trick that looks great, and I put it into my system, hopefully seamlessly, flawlessly through the whole system. So we're adding this thing, but we're adding to it. Of course, when you add something, I'm a big believer you have to take something out.
Sure, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part of being a coach, is the skill set of saying, yeah, it's a good thing. I have a movement matrix, push, pull, hinge, squat, and then I have plank or isometric movements, and then strength and basic strength movements, anti-rotation movements. That'd be the one-handed stuff. The first level of ballistic, and then the Olympic lifts, and it just flows across. And I have 37 exercises on it, and there's no magic reason for 37. That's just when I counted it. But when if I go to a workshop and I see an exercise that's better than what I have up there, I take that exercise, and it could be the greatest exercise ever invented, like the goblet squat. I mean, the most important. Who invented the goblet squat?
Jesus Christ, I'm going to say, at the Last Supper. Didn't he sit down with it?
Close. It was me. I did. I invented the goblet squat. It's a true story. As much as I love the goblet squat, I was working with a group up in Seattle not long ago, and we were doing bear hug carries with 100-pound wrestling bags. And I just said, every few feet, every 10 seconds or so, I would say squat. And these guys were squatting perfectly. So it's funny, as much as I love the goblet squat, and I do, and I use it as a basis of teaching the overhead squat, the front squat. If I could do everything again, I would have them do this bear hug squat to begin my squat teaching. It's remarkable how perfect everybody squatted every single time.
Wow.
So even though you fall in love with your darlings, you have to be able to cut them out. By the way, if anyone's listening as a coach, that the advice I just gave you right there about having, I don't care what your movement matrix is. And if you think lunges should be up there, put lunges in there. I don't care. But you have to defend it with, you have to make sure you have an isometric, a basic strength movement, an anti-rotation or asymmetrical or anti-rotation, a ballistic movement, and then of course a combination movement. And take the time intellectually to say, okay, and this is why I bring this up, is that we didn't have an anti-rotation pull. I thought the TRX was the stupidest thing I ever saw in my life. When they first came out, they sent me one in a DVD, which was funny. And the DVD, the original one, was like, oh, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And I thought everything was stupid until the one-handed single arm row. And I went, there you go. Get those heels together, get those knees together, hold that plank perfectly, and don't move on reps. There was a gap. That video filled a gap in for me that had been, I'd tried all kinds of things like one-handed rows, but if you've ever done one-arm rows, you have to do all that. You have to do a lot of magic with it to make it work, so you put a knee down on the bench, you put a hand down on the bench, but you really don't know then, because you got so many pillars that you can pillar yourself that you can't see the weakness.
Sure.
But in the one-arm row, the second you see this shrug come up or you see the body twist away, you can't hide that from me. You can't. I guess you could hide it from me with, like, I don't know, a really loose jacket or something like that. But you can't hide it from yourself. You got your shoulders on your earlobe and you're twisting away. I guess if you wore a sheet on top of your jacket, I wouldn't see it. So what's nice about that intellectual pursuit of where are my gaps, that really will highlight it. Here's what it highlights first, Rocky, is that I have a pretty good program, but there's a real gap in our exercise selection, or there's a real gap and usually it's interesting, when I first work with young coaches, their progressions are usually pretty good. Like they might go from, I call them 6-point rocks, but it's when your hands, knees, and feet are on the ground and you do squats on the ground. It's called a 6-point rock. And then, okay, so we start there and then we show the goblet squat, love it. And then from the goblet squat, we do the overhead squat, good. From the overhead squat, we do the front squat, good. I love where your head's at. And then from there, we do this, great. Okay, let's talk about a progression for the lunge. Oh, I just show them how to lunge. Well, where's the progression? How do you know someone's ready to? No, don't worry. When they can't do lunges, we just have them do leaping lunges. Well, the guy's got a bad knee, or whatever it is. What young coaches don't tend to have very well is regressions. They might be able to listen to this conversation and go, good. Tomorrow, every one of my lifters I'm going to teach them the clean and press, the squat snatch, the squat, clean and jerk, the bench press, the deadlift, and the back squat. And good. Those 6 exercises. You're working with an 89-year-old grandmother. Yeah. Well, 1 or 2 of those exercises, you might need there's a bit of teaching that's going to have to happen to get you there. What are your regressions? So I think I was okay on progressions as a young coach too. It was the regressions. But if you listen to my other point about that prisoner's dilemma, those core things, interesting. I think when you do that, I think your mind starts to work a little bit more like an accordion, where, okay, we can grow this thing out or we can shrink it down. I'm always fascinated when I read online, people say I'm a minimalist, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And then I'll realize that they pull out a program when T Nation asked me to write an article on 2 exercises, or, if you only have, like many of the people I work with online. Hey, how old are you, Rocky?
54.
Oh, you're just a baby then. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Just a mere child. 67?
That's a good year I was born. Yes.
Yeah, 67. Okay. Just before the Tet Offensive. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, it was 3 months before. That was Christmas, right? Christmas Day.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. So, and you have, how old are your children?
19 and 14.
Okay. So let's go back in your mind. Let's go back a full 7, 8 years, before either of them drove.
Yeah.
And they were, were they more active in middle school, junior high, or high school?
Ooh.
That involved you.
Gosh, I'd say grade school. I've coached them all the way through, but both of them same time, grade school for sure.
Okay. So put yourself back into that time and think about how many hours a day A typical day, do you have 3, 4, 5 hours to train?
Yeah.
You did?
Oh, for them? No, no. Okay. For them, it was an hour and a half each.
No, for
That's what,
you.
for me, oh, forget it. I mean, it all depends if the waves were there. I guess that's what I was my barometer, right? But maybe 30 to 45 minutes for my training. That's it.
Okay, so guess what I have to do when I work with you? I can't give you a 6-hour workout.
No.
So first we're gonna get there, we're gonna do an hour of foam rolling, we're gonna, line your chakras up, we're gonna, give you some coconut oil, and so we're gonna spend 20-minute oil pulling
Wow.
your teeth.
You've been to Santa Cruz, obviously. That's
Oh,
good.
sure. You're gonna make sure since you're a pita, we're gonna make sure that you have hummus and tabbouleh salad in your warm up, and a delicious lentil soup after. Dude, when my daughters were in junior high, I had 15 to 30 minutes a day to train, but I was a high level discus thrower. People kept saying, "How do you do it?" It's like, well, I have to outthink all of you guys who have 4 to 6 hours to train. And the funny thing is, when you train 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day, so that's where easy strength came from. That's where all the Litvinovs, the farmer walks. In the background, in my backyard, I was throwing the Highland Game heavyweight for distance in my backyard because I thought that mimicked the discus training. So I was doing the Highland Games so I would, do a set of presses, say, and get those done, and then go do some of that and come back. I mean, what I did is I took a 10-hour workout and pushed and minimalized it. I just threw out all the nonsense. I think this is an important point, is that when people read my work and say, "You're a minimalist," yeah, I'm a minimalist if you're 44, let's just say 44, the kids are busy, and you only have half an hour to train. Yeah, I'm a minimalist there. If you're a D1 athlete, and I had a D1 coach me complain one time, we only have 20 hours a week to do strength and conditioning. If you can't get it done in 20 hours, I like to, and then I look at their workout, it's all band pull aparts, it's all, they do 25 minutes of foam rolling, they do all this nonsense. Coach, a couple of years back, I think I hit my hand against the wall. I'm going to rub that out for a few hours. Oh, come on. Honestly, if you just did, could you imagine I have a program called One Lift a Day. It's where you do one lift. Could you imagine doing the Olympic squat snatch for 4 hours in one day? Just every minute on the minute, you just do one. Yeah, call me when you're done with that workout, huh?
Yeah, I would need a dartboard on the wall so every vertebrae that flies out of my body would have a place to go.
You wouldn't be able to hold a pen the rest of your life. You wouldn't be able to make a fist. But you can. There's so much you can do, and I often think, Rocky, that the tyranny of time makes you a better coach.
Yeah, because it forces you to really think, not only on your feet, but what are the big buckets? What are the things I really need to hammer through? And give them homework if they need to, if they want to just get the tabbouleh and hummus.
And the kids that have the hole in the heart will do the homework.
There you
go.
The
other ones will be, I got a buddy named Stan Finn. Can I swear?
Yeah.
Buddy Stan Finn. I love this. I think it was 1982 when I first heard this phrase from him. So this isn't brand new. He's still coaching at the same school. I saw him the other night. He said, "Potential is a French word for can't do shit." I always love that line because, as a coach, you sit around and, every so often you sit around and go, "I remember that kid, Rocky Snyder. Oh God, he had so much talent. Just a waste." Yeah, potential. And we all laugh because whenever you said the kid had potential, I've never heard the word potential said in a positive way, ever, ever. And so and then you'll be a kid who played with Rocky Snyder and, Paul. Yeah, Paul. He didn't have the size, didn't have the speed, but by God, did he bring it home? My God. When he put a load on, I know. And he's in the weight room doing these cleans and he's just getting fired up. And he goes, "Coach, it's like tackling." Yeah, I know. And you get that look in it. Yeah, to me, that's what coaching is.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one final question,
Oh,
and I'd be remiss here. You've been so generous with your time. I don't want to take much more of it, but your Middle Eastern studies, I just want to come back to full circle here. How do you, or do you, from the experiences that you got traveling to the Middle East, are there elements that you have woven in to your professional world?
well, you hear it all the time when I speak. If I talk about a word that's steno or tensive, steno symbol, a steno symbol is a word that has one meaning. It could, like the word gay in 2021 has one meaning. 100 years ago, waken lords and ladies gay on the mountain dawns a day. Don we now are gay apparel. When somebody says, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm a strength coach, I get a bicep, because bodybuilding has become the steno symbol of weightlifting. That comes from religious studies.
Mm.
So, which is, by the way, so why it's hard to teach religious studies. Religious education, theology, religious studies are all different fields, and that's important to me, but nobody else who's listening. So, but sometimes you'll use a word and you actually have to say, what do you mean? Like when you talk about the Hinduism or even Buddhism, and you say the word God, you have to be very careful about that because it doesn't mean what you thought it meant.
Mm.
Okay, so the other thing that so it's interesting because theology is based on philosophy, which is based on geometry. And so very often I will tell my athletes that the most important class they'll take in school is geometry. So in geometry, especially proofs, it's inductive, it's deductive. Okay, that's great, and we'll put that to the side. But as a strength coach, you're givens. So the first thing I ask when I work with somebody is, what equipment do you have? That's the very first question. Because if I'm going to give you a program, but you don't have an Olympic bar, well, there goes the snatch, the clean and jerk, the most deadlifts, most squats. We can work around it. If you say I have 26 kettlebells, my mind just went into and just turned into that. The second question I ask is, what exercises do you know and what do we need to work on? What do you know? What are your gaps? And what are things I need to actually teach you? Because if you know certain things, we're good. Well, those are your givens. Your equipment, what you know, your body mostly is a given. It's much better to be an Olympic lifter if you're this tall, and it's much better to be a basketball player if you're this tall. Those are givens. I mean, if you show up and you're playing a high school that has LeBron James on the court on the other team, and you got a bunch of 5'6" kids, there's a good chance that LeBron James in high school might do well against your team. It's a given. How can we defeat that? That's to prove. So once we have your givens, the route, your journey from here to there. By the way, the word coach literally means a four-wheeled conveyance where that takes you from here to there. So the givens are the givens, and then the proof is the system we're going to use. And that is, it sounds weird to talk about geometry, but the thing that theology did for me is it brought me back to geometry, brought me back to the first good philosophy courses I had. And that brought me back to geometry. And fortunately at the time, when I was coaching, it was like, since I had to do the route back, you follow? Since I had to go back to geometry, it was like, well, this track and field is geometry. I mean, it kind of is, you're a 50-meter shot, I'm a 50-foot shot putter, and you want to throw 60. Well, okay, let's go through the givens. Do you have a shot put? Do you rotate or do you glide or do you standing throw? I standing throw. Oh, good, because now we have now we're gonna get you 7 or 8 or 9 feet just by teaching you the glide or rotation, especially the rotation, and then you just build up on it from there. So for me, the theology background, the geometry background, gave me a mental system. When I talked about the movement matrix, so I want everyone I coach to snatch and clean and jerk at the nationals. That's not true, but let's say it as a strength coach.
Sure.
Well, to get you there, we have to have an Olympic bar. You have to have mobility in your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, your ankles, your knee. There are these things that we have to do, before we get you to the Olympic snatch and the Olympic clean and jerk. On the way to getting there, your discus is going to go farther, your shot's going to go farther, you're going to hurt more people on the football field.
Got it.
So this is how I kind of see things, and it's sort of it's odd to say this, but it's sort of a blessing to be able to have had that background, because I think I have some clarity. And it's interesting. I see criticisms on me online. It hurts my feeling. And the thing is that people always say I take too long to explain things. Is like, okay, folks, it's 5 sets of 2. There's your answer.
No, but you're telling me you have a formulaic approach that has a way of reducing the chance of overanalyzing. That's what I hear.
Yeah,
it's nice.
And here's the thing: that's the one thing I think everyone should coach American football. At least one game as offensive quarter, because you got 25 seconds to get in a play with a bunch of 15, 16, and 17-year-old boys. You got 25 seconds to get 11 people lined up, the ball snapped. You have to have 7 human beings on the line of scrimmage. The ball has to be snapped back. And you got 25 seconds to do it. And what it teaches you, that crunch of time teaches you, is we can't have a sermon. We can't have a homily. We can't have a discussion. We got to go. And all that discussion should have happened in July, not in October, November, December. And so that really helped me a lot. And so now, I mean, I'm working with this collegiate discus thrower, and she's noted a few times, it's like, it seems like you always seem to come up with okay, that was kind of the point about this thing. And well, yeah, but you got to understand is that I'm starting with literally stretch 1, 2, 3 is where we started. And then you're an advanced thrower, so you need to have this, but you don't have this, so we have to fix this. And so it is and you do after. It's like the way I explained to people about either losing body fat or getting yourself into better shape. Every day is a brick, and you just keep stacking those bricks up, and pretty soon you have the Great Wall of China. Mm-hmm. But and I think the mistake a lot of people make is they don't start with that day one brick and build on that brick. But if you know what you want to do, what you want to say, that you did the prisoner's dilemma, what cues you're going to use, then anything that comes in fits. It's going to fit. Anything new is going to fit,
Fabulous. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been great. Just a really, really in-depth conversation. The thing that I love is that this just starts off with one question and it evolves into an entire conversation that I had no idea where it would go. And I'm very pleased with where it ended up. So, Dan, thanks so much for your time. Well, that's it for another episode of the Zealous Podcast. Dan John, can't thank him enough for coming on. Be sure, check out any of his books, Never Let Go, or all the other ones. Plus, he's got workout generators on his website. I'll leave all the links in the description of this podcast. And until next time, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and tell a friend or two. And we'll see you again.